Julian Assange's extradition hearing day 2 at Woolwich Court in London. Today, new revelations about Julian's treatment at Belmarsh Prison being revealed by his lawyers. They say he has been handcuffed at least 11 times and strip searched totally naked twice in just the last 24 hours. Attorneys suggesting that this sort of treatment of their client has left him in a terrible mental state. Meanwhile, WikiLeaks editor Kristen Hrafnsson was temporarily barred from the hearing. He spoke to the press saying that not only are these charges against Assange without merit, but he asked the world why the contents of the publishings aren't being discussed. For more on all of this, we'll talk with former UK MP and friend of Assange, George Galloway. So firstly, George, can you please comment on the remarks given by one of his attorneys, Mark Summers, about Julian being handcuffed numerous times and then stripped nude twice?
Well, if you can't tremble with indignation at the treatment of Julian Assange yesterday, you probably don't have a pulse. You certainly don't have a soul. This is a man that should be in Oslo picking up a Nobel Peace Prize, but is instead being multiply handcuffed, strip-searched, held in 5 different cells just yesterday alone. And by the way, having his legal papers confiscated by the prison authorities when he got back to the prison, so unable to read overnight and prepare for his appearance in court today. It is simply monstrous. And this whole affair, this circus in Woolwich, you know, this is supposed to be the Westminster Court, but they've moved it to Woolwich because it's Woolwich Fort, not Woolwich Court. It is actually connected by underground tunnel to Belmarsh Prison. It is the physical expression of being guilty until proven innocent, rather than the other way around, which is supposed to be what our justice system is based on. If you're there, you're guilty. That's what the whole architecture and the whole behavior of the prison authorities, the court authorities, is signaling to the world.
Absolutely, George. And what do we know about Julian's editor, Kristen Hrafnsson, being temporarily barred from that courtroom? And does he have a point? Why aren't we discussing the contents of what was published?
Well, quite so, and this relates in part to something we discussed yesterday. In fact, today, the lawyers completely demolished the myth that Julian had endangered people's lives by publishing their names and so on. It turns out it was The Guardian that was responsible for publishing the names. Julian actually, with his own hand, excised the names of 10,000 people in those very documents.
Yeah.
He asked for more time to make sure that they were all clean of identifying features. It was the newspapers, in a rush to print, which even actually printed the password. Can you believe it? By accident, they printed the password to the file so that all and sundry in the world could get access to it. And we would have known this yesterday, Manila, when we were talking, if any of the coverage had actually given any of the details of that which they were talking of in the widest generalities. So the government's case has started out threadbare, but it's well full of holes now.
And George, can I mention something as a sidebar to our discussion yesterday, is that there's new talk right now on the internet that only RT is covering Julian Assange's case because the Russians have a vested interest in Julian because he coordinated with the Russians. That is the new talk. So that must be the only reason that you and I are discussing him, George. So I thought I'd throw that out there and get your response to that.
Well, of course, it's like your previous item. Russia's backing both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, in which case, why bother to back either of them? Because that's what the contest is going to be. So Russia needn't waste any money or time backing one or the other if it doesn't mind which one wins.
Right.
Because its candidate is going to win anyway. It's like betting on both horses in a two-horse race. I'm sorry to introduce gambling into the equation. This kind of madness, this Russia madness that has got the West in its grip, it's a kind of hysteria. I wasn't that cognizant in the 1950s. I'm not as old as I look, but I was alive, and I know exactly what it was like in the US in the 50s. But this must be close to it or even worse. The answer to every question, including Julian Assange, turns out to be the Russians.
I guess so. All the roads lead back to Moscow. And George, Julian's lawyers yesterday, they have also revealed that Julian attempted to contact the White House and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton ahead of the publishings that you just discussed to let them know that this was going to happen, but that he was shrugged off by the White House and shrugged off by the State Department. Meanwhile, the U.S. government attorneys are arguing that Julian's publishing was reckless. So what do you make of all of that?
Well, they told him at the White House to call back in a few hours. Here he was trying to tip off the White House, who could then have tipped off anyone that they now say was potentially endangered by these leaks. And they told them, they kept him hanging on the line and then told them to phone back in a few hours. This is all very stupid and silly. And contrary to your last point, actually, suddenly, the British media is full of Julian Assange. Julian Assange is trending on Twitter in Britain. After all these years of ploughing a lonely furrow, me and just a few others, now everyone, as I said the other day to you, everyone, like daffodils springing out of the spring earth, everyone's now talking about Julian Assange. And I'm pretty sure they're not doing it at the behest of Russia.
Oh, well, George, perhaps, Boris Johnson or the rest of Parliament is colluding with Assange. And, there's always some kind of collusion somewhere. Why not? I'll just put that out there.
Why not?
All right, my friend, we've got to leave it right there. We will stay on top of this for the viewers, of course. George Galloway, always appreciate your insight. Thank you.